Thanks for tuning in to the Mission Matters podcast, where we feature successful, mission-driven leaders committed to creating a positive change in the world. Our mission with this channel is to inspire other leaders by providing industry insights, new ideas, and inspiring stories from the pros.
All right. Hello, Paul Fife here, host of this show where I talk with leaders heading up mission-focused organizations, leading from the heart, inspiring others, and making a difference in our communities. This episode is sponsored by Paul Gregory Media, a certified B Corp. To learn more about what a B Corp is and what Paul Gregory Media does, visit paulgregorymedia.com. I know I always say I'm excited about my next guest, but I'm intrigued too, because who I have here actually is Chad Pedigo, Vice President of Development for DuPage Pads. Welcome, Chad. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Very excited to be here. I love the Mission Matters podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. You are omnipresent in my mind. You're everywhere. No matter where I go, you're there. And I follow you on social, and even all the places that I can't make or can't get to, you're there. And it's both exhausting following you, but inspiring as well. We're in so many of the same circles. I think I'm definitely a subset of all the circles that you're in. But I want to read this quick blurb I found on your LinkedIn. Chad leads a relationship and fund development strategy focused on growth, innovation, and strong donor stewardship practices to advance the mission of DuPage Pads, one family at a time in DuPage County. I would say one family at a time. I'm going to amend that to 50 to 60 families at a time, as we talked before this recording, and we'll dive into that too. And what is that mission, Chad, for DuPage Pads?
To end homelessness in our community.
Homelessness, absolutely. So what I'd love to do is maybe just dive into you a little bit. What has been your journey for the last decade or two, and what has led you to the fine organization DuPage Pads?
You bet. You mentioned that we encounter each other quite a bit, Paul, and that's because we are very fortunate to be in a thriving community where a lot of good is being accomplished, and a lot of different nonprofits, social groups, civic organizations, interdepartmental government agencies, everybody's working together to really make this community the special place that it is. And when I say community, I started as a transfer student to North Central College in Naperville in 2003. And that was my first introduction. I knew Naperville was a special place, but as my world has grown and my understanding of all the different organizations and causes, it's really more the county, and even the counties that color us, they're just really remarkable and help to accomplish a lot of good. I came up to North Central College from Lincoln College in Lincoln, Illinois, after completing my associates. And I was raised in Central Illinois in Springfield and have family and farmland kind of around the middle of the state. So we would do, Christmas trips up to Chicago, but never really spent a lot of time in the suburbs until I transferred for college, and immediately was just kind of thrown into understanding how the suburbs connect to the city and vice versa. And you don't say you're from Chicago if you're really living in Naperville, and just understanding kind of the way that all of the networks intertwined. And as a college student, I was very involved in some of our volunteer activities, our worship services on Wednesdays, and became acquainted with this church down the street that was helping to shelter people experiencing homelessness. And we were asked as students to come and help as overnight monitors or to help with preparing meals and laying pads on the floor. And I was shocked because I was in downtown Naperville, this thriving metropolis, or so it seemed. But around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, a crew of people would be walking, carrying their personal belongings, either in suitcases or in bags from the train station to one of the local churches nearby the college. And that was my first time my eyes were really open that there is a suburban homelessness, an unseen population, just as much as there is the type of homelessness that you encounter in the city proper.
Wow. Yeah, right here in Naperville, which is, like you said, it's kind of looked upon as a very affluent community, but there are pockets of people who come upon a circumstance that could quickly spiral out of control if not for the services and resources in the county and in the city.
Yeah. And as a college student, I didn't really fully appreciate that. I became more aware, but wasn't really actualizing in my mind what that meant. And then I moved around for a while and got involved with some different causes in other states. And I found myself returning to Illinois, and specifically to Naperville again in 2009, and became more involved, both working at North Central College, my alma mater, and helping to manage and lead their fine arts programming, but also getting reacquainted through service clubs, most specifically the Naperville Jaycees. And so that opportunity to help volunteer with different nonprofits in the community and to raise funds to support them and develop my own sense of leadership and leadership skills was really appealing to me. And that's how I became more familiarized and reacquainted with DuPage Pads and with another place near and dear to my heart, Bridge Communities. And both of them were focused around ending homelessness in two very unique ways. So I got to know them better and had little intention of human services being my long-term career path, but just fell so in love with the missions that ended up leading me to a job change. And I ended up working for Bridge Communities for nearly 6 years, and now spent the last 6 working with DuPage Pads.
6 and 6. Wow. That's quite a commitment. And I'm in hindsight, because you mentioned 2009. And I'm thinking, I started the business in 2006, which was a year before the housing crisis. And 2009, that's 2 years after the beginning of the housing crisis. In hindsight, do you think there was a spike around that time in homelessness because of that, the tail end of that housing crisis?
I'm sure there was. I don't have the data necessarily to support it, though we could easily find it. But I know anecdotally from multiple individuals who lost their home due to just the economic downshift and the housing bubble, of course, popping, and they became house poor. They were spending far more than 30% of their earned income each month on housing just to maintain a home that was beyond their means, and were struggling with it because there wasn't really an exit plan from that either without losing everything.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So 6 years ago, you landed at DuPage Pads. Tell us about DuPage Pads. We know its mission to end homelessness in DuPage County. I'd love to just expound on the services that they offer and, in just terms that everybody, can relate to.
I'll tell you a few observations that led me to being here in front of you today as an employee of DuPage Pads. And that was when I came back to Illinois. I was working on my graduate degree in leadership studies at North Central College, and the closest thing they had to a nonprofit management track at the time. And so I really wanted to dive deeper into several nonprofits that I admired. And DuPage Pads was one of them. Carol Simler was the longtime CEO. The network of churches involved addressing homelessness was quite vast, with over 40 different faith locations, usually 2 or 3 of which were open each night to bring individuals and families in to lay on a pad on the floor and to be able to have a hot dinner, a hot breakfast, and a sack lunch. But the thing that never sat well with me, both doing it as a volunteer and as a study of how nonprofits evolved and what ways that they were addressing their causes, was each morning they had to send everybody away. And that really didn't sit well with me when I was a college student. It didn't sit well with me again when I came back and was looking at them through different lenses through my civic involvement with the Jaycees and with other organizations and groups. And I wished at that point there was something I could do about it. But I didn't really know what that something would be. And lo and behold, in 2020, when everybody was asked to begin socially distancing and doors were being closed, faith institutions were shuttering their buildings. And so we did not have a destination for clients to be able to go to each night for shelter. And that led us to follow a path that was modeled around something we call medical respite. And medical respite, if you're experiencing homelessness, is extremely important because you've been discharged from the hospital for either a severe illness or injury, and you don't have a home to go rest in to recover. So if you're on the streets during the day or in the evening, you're medically vulnerable already, and you're more likely to encounter either increased illness or increased difficulties with your injury, infection, so on and so forth. So what DuPage Pads would do at the time was rent hotel rooms and provide that client with the safe space that they could stay in for a period of up to several weeks as they recover from their illness or injury. And then they would move back in with the population that was moving from church to church each night, sleeping on floors. And so we took that medical respite model and we thought, could we take our most medically vulnerable at the start of the pandemic and get them into hotels? And fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, not very many hotel rooms were being occupied. Travel had come to a grinding halt. And hotels were eager to have business. So we came up with a safe model, rented 20 rooms. Very quickly, that moved to 60. And within a few months, we were at 120 rooms scattered across different hotels, including in Naperville, Downers Grove, and the surrounding community. And that was a temporary means of sheltering individuals during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. But what it taught us and what we saw was what the dignity of a door meant for all of our clients. Having a safe space with lock and key, a washroom where you didn't need to ask for permission to use the bathroom, and the ability to really wake up each morning knowing where you were on the same pillow in the same bed and being able to focus on how you could make that a long-term avenue for you by getting into stable housing was happening at a much quicker click. And then we also saw reductions in illness, in both mental and physical health issues, and really saw what we believed could be a pathway towards a better way of solving homelessness. And that led us into what is now our interim housing center, the space that I'm sitting in, which is a former hotel that we purchased in 2022 and are developing an innovative concept that is changing the way we address homelessness. The first in the state of Illinois and one of the first in the country. We hope this model can be replicated in other communities that desperately need a resource like ours to be able to help get people back onto their feet and really increase the opportunity of long-term prospects for stable housing of their own.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty cool. So you're saying it's like a refurbished hotel?
Yeah. A former Red Roof Inn, and actually, coincidentally, one that we were renting rooms at during the height of the pandemic.
Right.
That we knew we did not want to, as COVID funding was ending, ARPA and CARES Act funds were being spent down. We didn't want to go back to asking people to be on the streets 12 hours a day and to have to move between location to location each night. We love our faith partners and our volunteers and how that solution was made possible for over 30 years. Pads was developed in 1985. So when you think about it, it was always meant to be temporary. 30 years later, we were still going through the same motions, but we knew that if we centralized services, we could continue to expand on the positive outcomes that we saw when we were renting hotel rooms. And we didn't want to move backwards. We definitely wanted to move forwards in the ways that we were addressing our clients' needs.
Well, it sounds to me like it takes significant funding as well. So let's just dive into funding for just a second. Where does the bulk of your funding come from?
When I became involved with DuPage Pads 6 years ago, we were about a $3 million annual operating budget. In the span of the last 6 years, we've moved up to about a $10 million operating budget. A lot of that expansion has to do with the interim housing center, but a lot also has to do with our supportive housing programs. So DuPage Pads really has kind of three main arms of service. One is our street outreach. That is staff that are literally on the street seeking out individuals who are unhoused, helping to assist them with their immediate needs and figuring out if there's a pathway either to shelter if necessary or back into stable housing of some kind. So yes to food and water and a kind handshake, but also what can we do to get you back into stable housing as quickly as possible? Then there is the emergency crisis situation, that need for housing, and that's the interim housing center. The first word in IHC is interim. This is not the long-term destination. This is that space to recover from the traumas of experiencing homelessness and then move forward with your life back into stable housing. And the third large part of what we do is supportive housing, both permanent, which is just like it says, long-term, either the duration of a person's need or for the duration of their lifetime, but also rapid rehousing. And we've done a lot of growth in domestic violence rapid rehousing just due to the number of cases and increase in our community. So the funding increase that you see there has increased to about 49% of our funding being governmentally sourced, specific for those housing programs. So that's HUD, Housing and Urban Development. They set aside a certain amount of money each year that goes to each state. Then the state divides it amongst the counties. Then the county divides it amongst their programs. So we apply every year to make sure that we can maintain those 180 plus apartments that we're providing assistance to. Then in addition to that, roughly 33 to 35% is individual contributions. It's donors in the community who want to see a change, who want to see our programs thrive, but who most importantly want to see homelessness end for one client or one family at a time, and help them through that journey by not only providing them a little bit of kindness, say on the streets or at the church, but supporting programs like ours that are proven solutions that are able to walk alongside the clients, help them through the difficulties they may encounter, reduce the number of traumas they've experienced, and really put them back on a path to success for long-term stable housing. And then we have a mix of our fundraising events, of course, like many nonprofits do, but we try to keep that amount small. That's roughly 5 to 6% annually. Those events are extremely important to us, but they're really intended to be fundraisers and not to be operationally reliant on the capital that comes from those events. It is significant, and usually we'll direct them towards specific causes. Most recently is the kitchen that we're building at our interim housing center. When we purchased this hotel structure, it had a small microwave and fridge in each room, and that was it. So making sure that we could feed 300 people a day was extremely critical to us. And the gifts that we've received over the last few years are coming to fruition with the kitchen that's going to open this fall, allowing us to bring volunteers in and help to feed our clients during their time with us in shelter.
Nice.
And then we have some grant work and some other smaller amounts of revenue that really make the whole of that 100% pie total.
Nice. So it's a great funding model. You went from, you said something like 3 or 4 million at first 6 years ago, and
around the time when I came in, that's where we were sitting. And a lot of that growth was mostly due to increasing our supportive housing arm, as I mentioned, but then operational capital to operate an interim housing center. It was due to the kindness of neighbors that were letting us come into their church facilities that we were providing shelter. So we weren't paying the electric bill, the water bill, for the food and other support on site. Our faith partners were helping by offering that. Now that we're at the interim housing center, it's up to us to make sure the lights stay on every day and that everyone has the water to brush their teeth or feel clean getting out of the shower or bath, and that we can maintain their safety, whether it be through a network of security cameras and on-site security on nights and weekends, especially for those clients who have left domestic violence situations, but also have staff on site to support them in moments of need, whether it's just a kind ear to listen to some of what you're experiencing or something more specific, like getting your entitlements and benefits arranged and getting yourself set up for the move into your apartment.
Yeah.
One of the things that always confounds me, if you're experiencing homelessness for the first time and you walk into a county building and you're handed a clipboard to apply for services, what do you think the second question is after you write your name down on that sheet?
Besides, how am I going to be taken care of, or what services you're going to provide, is where am I going to be?
That's an important question to answer, but the second question on that sheet when they hand you the clipboard is your address. And unfortunately, you are experiencing the most traumatic event of your life because you don't have one anymore.
Exactly.
You've left your home, or your home has been taken from you, and you're asked to include an address that you can no longer receive mail at. So that's one thing, if I can change in the future, I'm going to work on changing. But for now, our organization serves as the mailing address for roughly 1,000 people annually.
I want to say at first it sounds insensitive.
Yeah.
Gosh.
But that's just part of understanding the economics of homelessness. And if you've fallen into poverty, it is much more difficult to work your way out on your own. For many years, we had the concept of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Anybody should be able to just find a better job or find a cheaper place to live or find a way to avoid the triggers that are causing their traumas. And unfortunately, what we've learned as a society and as a community is it's simply just not that simple. And without a support network, it's very difficult for anyone to manage escaping poverty on their own. And if you've been in it chronically for a long period of time, it becomes that much more traumatic and hopeless.
Yeah.
So just breaking through the trauma and reinstituting hope in someone's life can be the very first step towards a complete transformation in what they believe that they're either capable of or they deserve in this world. And we do a lot of transforming at DuPage Pads.
That's great to hear. I mean, just my time with Habitat, you realize that homelessness is a symptom.
Yes.
So many other things going on that it's not a quick fix unless you're just fixing that symptom. So there's other things that you're fixing.
Yeah.
The housing is one, and that helps, but there's other things underlying. And so my question to you is, with those other underlying conditions that manifest itself into that one symptom and many others, are you partnering with other agencies? Because no nonprofit is an island unto themselves, right? So yeah. I got to imagine there's some partnerships going on too to help.
Oh, yes. Quite a few. We are not on an island. We were born out of community partnership. PADS, the acronym, was Public Action to Deliver Shelter. And it was meant to be communities coming together and determining what resources were needed and what partnerships were needed to really make sure no one was sleeping rough on the streets and that no one was experiencing the traumas and danger of being unsheltered. As we came and consolidated resources here for the interim housing center, we really had to rely on partnerships because this was a whole new ballgame in addressing homelessness. So working with our partners and figuring out how can we empower our clients was very important to us, but there was a hiccup. We learned that we were zoned as lodging, which was wonderful, and we did not experience a lot of NIMBY, not in my backyard, or resistance towards bringing our mission to this location in Downers Grove. But because of the way that we were zoned and for lodging, we can't introduce a lot of social services here at the same site that all of our clients we know need the social services are at.
Okay.
So we started searching and we located an office suite that's less than an eighth of a mile from here. And we rented those units to become our empowerment center. And that's where a lot of great activities take place for our clients, from employment training, resume building, and job coaching, to tutoring for our students, to a TIP program, which is born out of a university in Chicago and is turning impossible to possible. And it's a really great group program that helps our clients kind of break through either those perceived or known barriers that they feel are holding them back from becoming stably housed and successful once again. And a lot of other great programming that comes out of our empowerment center. But we realized that we were even challenged to move our clients from being in shelter to that facility, even though it's just an eighth of a mile. So we partnered with the Hinsdale Junior Women's Club, who helped us to purchase a passenger van that now shuttles between the two locations, as well as to other destinations in the area for our clients who don't have their own transportation, just to make sure that accessibility is there for everyone. And we work with a number of local partners from both physical and mental health perspectives, Americare, Midwestern University, College of DuPage on the education side, to other nonprofits, as well, NAMI, PRC, Outreach House, the Glen House Food Pantry. There are so many great causes in our community.
Yeah.
And one of the benefits of me coming into this role is I was either affiliated or familiar with many of them before stepping into our development vice president position. And so it was easier for me to pick up a phone when a need was identified or when we saw something that we could help support and make those connections and that connectivity. And that's part of my background is ever since I was young, my core values are making sure that I alleviate suffering and infuse kindness, and that if there's a problem that can be addressed, finding ways to help to solve it. And so one of the things I enjoy the most about my job is being open-minded to innovation and finding partners that are also seeking to help people and help solve problems and working through ways that we can accomplish that together. That is what helps me fill my cup and helps me be feeling successful at the end of the day, is we've seen something, we know that we can do better together, and then finding a way to bring us closer to each other in order to accomplish it.
That's so important, even from scaling. And you guys scaled over 200% in 6 years. So innovation,
It is wild.
automation, wherever you can. Yeah, it's and relying on partners for sure.
And we're not done. We're just, I would say, 2/3 of the way through proof of concept for this model of addressing homelessness. But we're still doing a lot of other things while we're working towards that full proof of concept as well. And one of the things I greatly appreciate, our CEO and president, April Redzik, is part of a statewide network of shelter providers and has been sharing our data very freely with other nonprofits similar to us that are finding ways to address homelessness in their community. And several others have already started advancing, either looking at property to purchase or purchasing properties and determining how they're going to fund those and use those over the long term. So we're a few years ahead of the curve. And like I said earlier, we're the first in the nation, but we're not keeping all that to ourselves. We're really sharing the tough lessons that we learned, as well as the positive outcomes that we're seeing and the benefits coming from it, so others can take that practice and put it into motion in their communities.
That's great. It's almost like open source. You're sharing your model before the model's complete. Just to even, I think there's two things that come out of that. One is, the sharing of information, right? But also just kind of working out the kinks too.
And I often laugh because we've been building the plane while we're flying it for some time.
That's great.
And folks who come in are very patient with us. They understand that we're not perfect and that we're still figuring out ways for process improvements, figuring out ways to engage volunteers again, back to like they did when they were in the faith settings. Pathways for our clients to be able to exit. The biggest factor right now that is a barrier for anyone staying here is affordable housing. And if you look at our surrounding community, affordable housing is certainly endangered, and if not almost extinct at this point. And so, what are we going to do to change that? Where are community leaders going to step in and really focus around creating more affordable housing in addition to all the wonderful, beautiful homes and apartments that are being built at market rate,
Mhm.
which are also extremely important. But for the folks that are living, working, or in school here in DuPage County that cannot afford those, there needs to be a safer answer for affordable housing that they're able to find as a destination to call home.
There does. And it could always be improvements there because the wait list for that is so huge.
Yeah.
And I think of somebody we just did a podcast for right before this one with Martin Avenue Apartments. And
Yep.
they have a 2-year waiting list, not because there's a 2-year waiting list, because they cut it off at 2 years because the needs change after 2 years. And they could build another building tomorrow and they'd still have another 2-year waiting list. That's how great the need is. But I will give a shout out to DuPage County, who does reserve funds for new housing.
Not only the
housing.
county, but some of our local community foundations as well. DuPage Foundation has
Yes.
done a great job in partnership with them and has been very generous through some of their transformation grants. The room I'm sitting in right now with you is partial funding through that program to renovate each of these rooms. So this room did not look this bright and welcoming when we purchased the hotel. But was a specific effort to have modular furniture so the rooms could be adjusted based on the size of the family, or bunked almost college roommate style, if you can imagine. If you're two non-familial adults, we're doubled up in every single room. So that allows us to try to shelter as many people as possible with only 115 rooms to offer shelter in. And part of that funding that helps us to be able to update these rooms and continue to update the space to build the kitchen downstairs comes through Community Memorial Foundation, DuPage Foundation, and several other strong key grant partners that ever since we bought this building in 2022 and said, here's what we want you to invest in, here's what the next 40 years of ending homelessness could look like, have joined us in believing in this mission and making this place possible.
Yeah. So shout out to them too, for sure. Well, you mentioned one of the biggest challenges was the housing itself. Looking back at the past 6 years, are there any other challenges that you've come across that had to be overcome?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers kind of tell a story in of themselves. So we helped over 1,000 local community members last year. Over 600 of them stayed here at the interim housing center, but only 276 exited into another stable housing, a place that they could afford, or maybe working with a program like Habitat for Humanity, or maybe through family reunification, we're able to go back to a family member's home, whatever the case may be. So what happens to the other 400? Well, they're still here. And so being able to help address their needs and help continue to find safe transition pathways for them is extremely important to us. At the same time, with more than 100 children living here at the shelter, making sure that we're meeting their needs and their developmental goals. For a child, if you experience 1 year of homelessness, you're more than likely to fall behind 2 years academically. And if you
Really?
experience homelessness as a child, you're 10 times or more likely to experience homelessness as an adult. So we seek to really disrupt those cycles here and now at the Interim Housing Center and address those needs, working with education liaisons with the different school districts, working with our tutoring program. Our faith partners come in and do some really remarkable programs just to let kids be kids. And we received some governmental funding that allowed us to even install a playground on the property this year, as there's no safe park within walking distance.
I love that.
Or no safe walking path to reach a park in walking distance for our families. So now at least we have a place where they can be kids while they're here on the property. And figuring out ways that we're able to continue to address those needs, as well as for our individuals, is really important to us and are the challenges that we're working through on a daily basis on an individual level. You mentioned Martin Avenue just a minute ago, and most recently, our longest stayers are seniors with no support network. These are individuals who may be of no real cause of their own, have been either priced out of their home or experienced financial hardship, and are now in an extremely vulnerable position, but they don't have family to help to house them, whether they've been disconnected from them or there just aren't family for them to reach out to. And there's not a lot of senior supportive housing in our area either. So everyone's pathway forward out of homelessness is a little bit different, and it's figuring out how to address their challenges and remove their barriers to help them be successful in it. At the same time, looking as an organization at the much bigger picture, we've been at capacity since we purchased the structure in 2022. And so, working with other shelter providers in the area, we do our best to be able to make sure everyone has a safe place to go. But our wait list just a month or two ago had less than 20 people on it. And as of this morning, has more than 80 on it. So we know that these are individuals who are here in this local community that are going to be sleeping rough tonight or sleeping in their car or just trying to find a friend or someone that will allow them a room or a couch to surf on in order to have a safe destination to go to with a lot of uncertainty if we can't help our clients who are here at the shelter to exit from the IHC and open up more beds for new individuals to come in and start working on their support cases.
Is it seasonality, do you think? With the spike from 20 to 80?
Seasons always have a factor, but that's not the only cause. So yes, as it gets colder, more individuals who have been sleeping rough outside seek somewhere to come indoors. But economic factors are just as likely. Someone may have been paying for hotel rooms just to try to get by and burn through all of their reserve funding. And if you try to rent an apartment, at least most recently, from what we're told in this community, even a one-bedroom apartment, you're looking at paying your first month's rent, your last month's rent, and probably a third month's worth of rent for a security deposit, which oftentimes can add up to anywhere between $4,000 to $6,000. So you've been exhausting your resources just to stay in an affordable motel or staying with friends trying to scrape together what you can. And now you need to produce several $1,000s just to get into a place. So we have programs that help to intervene there as well. Our Housing Now program, if you have become homeless, but you are earning at least as close to a living wage as you can, it seeks to help pay those kind of entry costs, those first month, last month security deposit, as well as maybe for some minor furnishings and other things to get you stable as quickly as possible into an apartment. But then the client themselves pays all or a significant portion of their rent. And we continue to provide case management for a year to make sure that they remain stable now that they've been placed back into housing. Tenant-based rental assistance is another program that we provide where it moves on a sliding scale based on your earnings. So if you're working a minimum wage job, you're only paying 30% of your earnings regardless of what that job is providing you. But then we work for a more gainful employment of a more living wage. And as you're earning more, that scale of how much you're paying for your rent can continue to increase with you. So we've got a lot of good solutions that are focused around and catered to the individual needs of whomever we're helping to assist to make sure that they can be successful for the long term.
I love that. And you also mentioned like a livable wage. I don't know what it is in the state of Illinois. I think the last figure I saw was somewhere around 23,000. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the needle feels like it's always moving.
Yeah.
But if you were really seeking to live and be successful and just to be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment in this community while you're doing it, you need to be earning between, I think the most recent figures brought by the county are $24 to $26 an hour.
Well, I've got to do math. I can't do that math in my head. I always multiply it by 2080 and then come up with this with the annual salary. But that's got to be around 30,000, I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Which is tough. I mean, that's the bare minimum.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the number moves around quite a bit. So in the community each year or every 2 years, I believe they'll do a census and look at what the average cost of living is and what the kind of living wage benchmark is. And because we are in such an affluent community, it makes it that much higher. And it's wonderful that we are. And we certainly want that economy to continue to thrive. But there has to be a connecting point that makes sure that the other half of that loop remains connected. We need a workforce in this community. And oftentimes you may look at the server when you're sitting at the restaurant, or the cashier when you're walking out with your groceries, or the attendant at the car wash as you're going through and not realize that that person is experiencing homelessness or extreme financial hardship. Because many of our clients are working in the community that we live in and are trying to make ends meet, but the economic imbalance is against them in order to be able to earn enough to be able to afford a place to live and not choose between utilities or groceries or medicine.
And that wasn't always the case, right? I read something somewhere where the living wage or the wage that you were making and cost of living were about like this. And now, the wage is way up, but the cost of living is exponentially way above that. The gap is just widened in the
The gap
last
is widened
4 years.
significantly. And in different communities, that gap can, squeeze a little tighter or get a little further. I would anecdotally say in our community, that gap has increased during the time that I've been with both Bridge and DuPage Pads.
So just in the last decade.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've certainly learned a lot. I think I need to recap just real quick the three areas of service areas that DuPage Pads provides, right? So we start on the street and talk with people, food, water, and find out their situation and see if there's a way that they can be plugged into the services. The second is what again?
That's the Interim Housing Center. So our access point is our access center in Wheaton, Illinois.
Yep.
And that's where our offices have been on Liberty Street for, 30 plus years.
Yep.
And it pre-pandemic served as our daytime site where you could come take a shower, wash your clothes, get a hot lunch, make your way back to a different faith institution that night. Now that we have centralized shelter here in Downers Grove at our Interim Housing Center, that's become our client access center where those who are in street outreach can still come for a hot meal, take a shower, be able to do their laundry, but also work with our case management team there to figure out their access point into the Interim Housing Center or to another safe destination that's appropriate for them.
Right. So that's 2. And then 3 is the permanent housing.
It's the supportive housing. Yep. Whether it's part of our permanent supportive housing or another one of our different supportive housing arms, it's that access point that moves you from the crisis intervention, being in shelter at the IHC, stabilizing your situation towards a more stable long-term living environment.
Awesome. We're going to be sure to write all this up in the bullet points in the landing page for this too, because
I've already done the work for you. We have an annual impact statement that talks through all of our different programs that I'd love to provide you a link to.
Awesome.
And it can explain more about our different services, but really shows some of the data points that are key to what we see are proven solutions to end homelessness. Those 619 people that were sheltered here in the past year, those 276 that exited out into stable housing, and the 309 total children that were involved in our services. So there's a lot of great information that's in here. One of the things that always stands out to me, and if you're looking to support and help, we feed nearly 300 people a day. And if you do the math, that's over 300,000 meals served annually. And once our kitchen is complete and open for business, we're really going to be looking for volunteer groups to come back into the space and help us to feed our clients. So there'll be some information available on our website that helps to share more about that and ways to get involved. But there's a number of other ways to help us meet urgent needs too. And the great thing about my line of work is I am a big believer and champion of philanthropy. And I work with a lot of other amazing causes that either help to increase philanthropy in our community or to utilize the philanthropic spirit to accomplish some really great things. So that goes back to our partnership conversation earlier. Just having a great network of partners to work with, we're really excited to be able to utilize that kitchen to help our guests and then utilize the support of the community to make sure that we're getting clients what they need when they need it so they can truly and effectively end their homelessness.
Awesome. And for our listeners out there, the website address is
www.dupagepads.org. And if you're looking for volunteer opportunities, you can link to it through our website or just add the word volunteer in front of our web address, volunteer.dupagepads.org. And that'll take you to a portal that talks specifically and exclusively about our volunteer opportunities and ways to sign up.
Nice. And if you're looking at this through the Paul Gregory Media site, paulgregorymedia.com/podcast, you could search for Chad Pedigo and find out the link to that impact report, the website, and some other references that were made during this podcast. I'm going to finish, Chad, just with what is something about you that not many people know about? We talked about this, I think, a little bit before.
We did. I got 2 things. I'll talk on the personal side, and then I want to leave a really important thought to me that I learned through my time being involved in this mission that I think is really important for others to just kind of shift our lens. So for me personally, not everybody knows, but I used to be a singer-dancer and was even professionally the lead in a production up in the Wisconsin Dells for 5 seasons. And I've done a number of musicals here in the area with a number of wonderful musical talents. from local community leaders to other nonprofits to friends that I've made along the way, and have shared the stage with our former Mayor Emeritus Pradel and our Chief of Police and many others, and just really love to sing and dance and bring a musical or a play to life for others to enjoy. So don't get to do it very much or very often these days, but spent a lot of time doing that in my younger years, and still love to support it, attend productions at the Paramount and locally here in Naperville and other communities with the local production companies, and really enjoy that. So for me, not a lot of people know that I used to sing and dance in a past life and even have a minor in dance, and still occasionally will sing a song or sing a national anthem here or there to help support causes. And then as a nugget to think about, you will notice if you go back and re-listen to this podcast, I never once said we help the homeless, because there is not the homeless. The stigma that is often associated with individuals and families experiencing homelessness, we don't talk about the housed, how are the housed doing in their homes? So we really are a people first organization. And I would love for anyone who's listening or watching this podcast to reframe in your own mind, seeing the person first. If you hear a group saying, let's help the homeless, pause right there and say, let's help people that are experiencing homelessness, whether it's individuals or families or neighbors or seniors, because seeing the person first is the very first and most important step to addressing their needs, humanizing their experiences, reducing their trauma, and helping them to find a way to lead improved, healthier life. So please think about that. If you ever hear someone talking about helping the homeless, just pause for a minute and say, yes, let's help our neighbors. Let's help those people. Let's see them as people first and address homelessness. Because like you said earlier, it's just a point in time. It's just an experience. It's not who our neighbors are. And we really want to change the way that we think about that going forward.
Linguistics matter.
They do.
They do. And people first, yes. We've been taught that from, well, some people, I guess, but I certainly have been taught that from a young age. People with abilities, people with
exactly
this or that. And it's a very good point, because it retrains the brain to think about the person first.
Most certainly.
Very
Paul,
well put.
thank you for having me on the Mission Matters podcast. I hope maybe down the road, another year or two, I can come back and do a part 2 and tell you about all the successful, great things that have been accomplished here at the Interim Housing Center.
I feel like we do need a part 2 at some point. Yes. And there's so much going on. So thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul.
Till next time, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Mission Matters podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.